Hi friends, are you wondering which chicken products are the healthiest? It's not what you think. Today we will talk about the nutrition in the different parts of a chicken and look into how processed chickens, like chicken nuggets, affect your health. Now, when I was a kid, I watched my mom use a cleaver to chop an entire chicken into small parts, and each part cooked differently and tasted different. My favorite part was the chicken wing, but not the triangular piece, but the one with the two little tiny bones. That body part is equivalent to your forearm. You have two bones in your forearm. It's called the radial and ulnar bones. These days, you don't need a cleaver as most raw chicken is sold pre-cut. I rarely see people buy an entire whole chicken, but see chicken breasts, thighs, legs, and wings bought frequently. It's common to find raw chicken sold skinless, and if you shop at an Asian supermarket, you can also buy organ meats as well. As a kid, I loved to eat chicken gizzard and gnaw on chicken bone, and then we would feed the scraps to our dogs. Apparently, that isn't a good idea, as chicken bones are hollow and easily form sharp splinters that can perforate their bowels. And they're also really bad for your teeth. Now, do you have a preference between dark or white meat? I used to really like the dark meat, especially the one on the small drumstick. That bone is called the humerus, which is equivalent to your arm. Now, my least favorite is the thigh, which has a bone called the femur, but the big drumstick was pretty tasty, and that has two bones called the tibia and fibula. You also have the same bones in you. And the thigh bone, that's the longest bone in your body, whereas the longest chicken bone is the tibia. Now, unlike people, bird bones are hollow with air sacs, which are light and ideal for flying. Have you wondered why dark meat tastes different? Dark meat has more myoglobin, a protein that holds iron. It also has more B vitamins like B6 and B12 and the mineral zinc. Now, can you guess why that body part would need more nutrients? If you guessed it is because it needs more energy, you would be correct. And that's why dark meats are found in the arms and legs for flying or running, and the white meat with less nutrients is the meat found on the body, like chicken breasts. Dark meat is also softer because it has 3 times more fat than white meat. Here's a ranking of fat for chicken parts from the highest to lowest. Now, if you want to reduce your fat intake, then eating skinless, boneless chicken breasts is best. The bone marrow is also full of fat, and that's why it tastes so good. I was surprised to learn that chicken actually has more monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats than saturated fat. In hopes to reduce cholesterol, many people have stopped eating red meat for chicken, but unfortunately, when it comes to blood cholesterol, it doesn't make much of a difference if you're still eating saturated fat. The greatest benefit comes when you switch from animal protein to plant protein. And just by adding some beans in your meals, you can actually make more of a difference. A rough estimate of each cut of meat is roughly 70% unsaturated fat and 30% saturated fat. The skin is super concentrated in both saturated fat and unsaturated fats, and by eating the wing with the skin on, you can more than double your fat intake. If you want to reduce your blood sugar, your weight, then getting your body more insulin sensitive is beneficial. Unfortunately, excess saturated fat has been shown to make people more insulin resistant, leading to higher blood sugar spikes and higher insulin levels, especially when you add on refined carbohydrates. These all contribute to weight gain. So the worst way to eat a chicken is to eat deep fried breaded chicken sandwiches made out of white bread. Pretty much everywhere you can find chicken and fast food will have this combination. Whether it's McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, KFC, Wendy's, they all have their versions of deep fried, insulin resistant chicken sandwiches smothered with more fat. This phenomenon linking insulin resistance and saturated fat has been known since 1920s. But like most of history, it got lost in the weeds. In 1927, healthy young male medical students volunteered to eat 4 separate diets. Group 1 got a pretty good high quality diet with lean meats and egg whites. Group 2 got a high fat diet with oil, mayonnaise, cream, and butter, which would be approved as a keto diet. Group 3, they basically got nothing to eat. They were fasted for 2 days. And group 4 actually got a very high carbohydrate diet. They were given oats, brown rice, potatoes, fruit, bread, syrup, candy, and pastries. Pretty much mostly junky carbs. And that sounds almost like the standard American diet, except they excluded meat and pure fat. Then all 4 groups were given a sugar challenge after 2 days. known as a glucose tolerance test. This is how we can diagnose someone with diabetes, like gestational diabetes. Without a sugar challenge, you really don't know if they have insulin resistance. And take a look at this graph. The people who fasted and ate a high-fat diet had the highest blood sugars. And surprisingly, the people who ate the high carbohydrate diet had the lowest blood sugars. And this is why it's important to avoid saturated fat if you have diabetes, prediabetes, fatty liver, or if you are concerned about your weight. Now, another issue with eating chicken with the skin on is cholesterol. Here is a ranking of cholesterol for chicken parts from highest to lowest. Now, if you are concerned about your own blood cholesterol levels, the most important fat to reduce is still saturated fat. Dietary cholesterol don't raise cholesterol levels as much as eating saturated fat. One simple biohack that you can do to reduce the absorption of cholesterol as well as the absorption of saturated fat is to eat fiber before you eat your meat. Now, this is not a fiber supplement. This is really eating real food, like a bowl of beans or a hearty kale salad, or both of them, or even a bowl of whole grains like sorghum or millet with some berries and some sweet potatoes. Everything I just named is high in fiber. These high fiber foods can form a fiber wall really to protect your gut from absorbing toxins and the cholesterol and saturated fats in the chicken. Now, it's not going to be perfect and you have to eat more fiber than chicken. You can't eat like one leaf and then eat a bunch of chicken and expect that to work. Unfortunately, all animals have saturated fat. It is well accepted that high animal protein leads to high LDL cholesterol levels, which directly increases the risk of heart attacks and strokes. But it isn't by itself the only risk factor. Like smoking, high blood pressure, diabetes will increase it even more. Now, I know some people on the internet choose to ignore their high LDL cholesterol levels, which is commonly seen and almost universal in people whose diet is centered on animal meat and animal products. They don't believe that their high LDL cholesterol is an accurate marker to assess the inflammation in their body and blood vessels. Now, there is some partial truth to that statement. This is because high-density LDL cholesterol is less damaging than low-density LDL cholesterol. It's similar to tossing a racquetball or baseball at your window. They both have different densities. The racquetball is less dense, softer, and hollow, and the baseball is more dense and hard. But if you throw them both out the window, they can both break the window with enough force. Low-density LDL particles are like baseballs. They land harder on your blood vessel wall, doing more damage. People who have high triglycerides generally have more low-density LDL particles. Now, these are people who eat a highly refined sugar and carbohydrate diet, like white bread, white pasta, desserts, sweet drinks, cookies, candies, cakes. Excess high-density LDL particles are like racquetball, which, they appear flexible, but if you throw them over and over with enough force, they too will break your window. However, there is no practical way to really separate low versus high-density LDL cholesterol. And in fact, LDL cholesterol is not even the most accurate marker. The best test to get to really know how much damaging LDL cholesterol you have is called ApoB. Have you had your annual ApoB test yet? Now, the other point people forget is that anything in your body in excess is toxic. This includes sugars, this includes protein, this includes potassium, sodium, water, white blood cells, red blood cells, antibodies, vitamins, and fat, especially cholesterol and LDL particles. So everything that is good and essential for your life needs to be at an optimal level, especially when it's just traveling in your blood. Fatty molecules like saturated fat and LDL cholesterol, they don't belong in your blood. When it's there, they can only damage the blood vessels that they're traveling in. Most cholesterol molecules, they don't stay in the blood vessels very long, except for one, LDL cholesterol, which has a half-life of about 3 days. That means it takes 3 days to get rid of just half of your LDL cholesterol after you've eaten that chicken. So if you want to reduce your LDL cholesterol, just start by spacing out when you eat chicken. And if you just limit it to twice a week, you'll significantly drop your LDL cholesterol. But if you replace it with another animal meat, then you're stuck in the same position and maybe even worse. Now, have you ever wondered when people started eating so much chicken? Chicken really took off in the 1970s in America, and people went from eating 50 pounds per person of chicken meat per year to over 100 pounds per person per year. Now remember, these are not lab-created meats. Like, there are 74 billion living birds are eaten around the world every year. Like, how does that even happen? How is that even possible? How do you even raise that many animals? I don't even think I ever learned how to count beyond 1,000,000 as a kid. The history of chicken as food is fascinating. If you're a stay-at-home mom or a housewife, you're going to love this story. In 1923, Cecile Steele, a stay-at-home mom and housewife, raised home chickens for eggs. Now, one day, she ordered 50 chickens, but 10 times more were delivered, equal to 500 chickens. Now, instead of returning them, she decided to see if she could raise them for extra money. So she kept these chicklets in her piano box to keep them warm. 4 months later, less than 400 chickens survived, but she made an equivalent of $11 per pound of meat in today's value. Her husband literally quit his job to help her. Within 3 years, she and her husband grew the farm to 10,000 chickens, which buffered them from the Great Depression. Thousands of farmers tried to copycat their success, but unfortunately, many were unsuccessful because they didn't think about why over 100 of Cecile's chickens died, which was a loss of over 20% of her investment. Can you guess why? So let's think about it. The chickens were stuck in a chicken coop away from sunlight. And what is the sunshine vitamin we all need? Vitamin D. That's correct. Even chickens need vitamin D to live. They basically died of rickets, vitamin D deficiency. Luckily for chickens, people were getting rickets years before until they took supplements in the form of cod liver oil. So when vitamin D was supplemented in chicken feed, chicken rickets disappeared. In America, our government supplements vitamin D in dairy and plant milks. But if you don't eat dairy or drink vitamin D fortified milk, then you really need to take your vitamin D as a supplement. It's hard to get adequate vitamin D levels just with sunshine because we are all stuck indoors in our own chicken coops. In addition, if you're overweight, if you're dark skinned, if you're over 65, or if you're using sunblock when you go outside or you wear UV protective clothing, or if the sunlight where you live isn't sufficient in UVB rays, which is above 37 degrees north in latitude, the UV light won't penetrate to stimulate vitamin D production. For years, I didn't like milk. I didn't drink any, and I wasn't taking any supplements. And when I had my first vitamin D level measured after I graduated from fellowship, it was a single-digit number. Very, very bad. My dad had an undetectable vitamin D level. I don't think I've ever seen a lower level in anybody. And he suffered a spinal fracture from osteomalacia from low vitamin D. The surgeon told me that when he screwed in the rod in my dad's spine, my dad's bone was so soft that he didn't know if it would hold. Now, my dad would have taken vitamin D supplements if someone had told him, you need to take some vitamin D. That cheap intervention could have been life-saving to prevent his spinal fracture. But that didn't happen, even though vitamin D was discovered in 1920 and every medical doctor has learned about rickets. The thing is, having an adequate amount of vitamin D is not just necessary for your bone health, it is an integral part of your immune health, brain and nerve health, and blood sugar control. During medical school, I got super sick with the flu during my very first rotation, which was pediatrics, and it took me 3 months to recover. In fellowship, I got gestational diabetes. Unfortunately, I didn't get my vitamin D level checked until after fellowship, and no one ever told me to take vitamin D. Luckily, I wised up and started supplementing, aiming for an optimal level of at least 50 nanograms per milliliters of vitamin D. Thank God, because as a first responder to the chaotic events of 2020, I am so thankful I wised up before 2020. As a result, I've not gotten sick, even though I've been actively dealing with super contagious bugs for decades. Looking back, it all makes sense. I basically spent college, medical school, residency, and fellowship indoors, which was equivalent to 13 years of sleep deprivation and training in a chicken coop with fluorescent, incandescent, and LED lights that don't stimulate vitamin D production. Now that I'm wiser, I don't take any chances with critical, essential micronutrients. Just like chickens, I take a daily supplement because I know I don't spend enough time outdoors to get any vitamin D made. So every year I check my vitamin D level just to be sure. And if you want to know what I take, I have a link in the show notes below. Can you imagine paying $11 a pound for a chicken? There would definitely be a revolution against chicken today. Now, when you buy chicken in the supermarket, it's probably sold for less than $3 a pound. You know how they make it so cheap? Well, they made chickens fatter by giving them antibiotics to eat since the 1950s. Antibiotics are used and abused in the farming industry to promote the growth of farm animals. Every time a person or animal is given an antibiotic for any reason or no good reason, they are incubators of superbugs, which are drug-resistant bacteria. These bacteria multiply every 15 minutes. So one bacteria becomes 2, in 15 minutes 2 becomes 4, in another 15 minutes, and in an hour, you would have 16 baby bacteria from that one bacteria. Now, wouldn't it be nice if your money multiplied like that? Each one of us and each chicken has trillions of bacteria in the gut at any given time. There are 25.9 billion chickens in the world, each pooping trillions of deadly drug-resistant bacteria every day if they're given antibiotics. And this toxic poop contaminates the soil. So anybody who comes in contact with the soil or with the chickens, like the farmer to the butcher to the store clerk to the shopper, is going to get exposed. And this is how drug-resistant ESBL organisms spread. ESBL stands for extended spectrum beta-lactamase, which means 90% of the antibiotics won't work if you get an infection with an ESBL organism like ESBL E. coli and ESBL salmonella. You have to generally use an IV antibiotics. These organisms contaminate the chicken in the supermarket, starting with your shopping cart. And if you bring them home to wash your chicken in your sink, you will easily contaminate your entire home. Never rinse any raw meat in your kitchen sink. Go in the yard and do it with a hose if you have to clean your meat. It's really no joke. Eating chicken increases your risk of getting a drug-resistant E. coli urinary tract infection. Yes, E. coli is rampant in chicken. It's not just in beef. So if you are struggling with urinary tract infections, you should consider not bringing any raw chicken home. Organic and kosher chickens, pasture-raised, they're not any better when it comes to drug-resistant contamination. Remember how I used to watch my mom chopping raw meat with a cleaver? Well, don't do that. You're going to splatter infected chicken juice all over your kitchen. And if you need to chop any raw meat, go outdoors in the sunlight to do it. And wash your hands before you come back in the house and touch the doorknobs. And remember, your chopping board can harbor a lot of germs. Put that in the dishwasher and never chop raw veggies on a board that you use to chop any raw meats. Now these days, many people are just too busy to make their own chicken, so they buy pre-made rotisserie, fried chicken, stir-fried chicken, grilled chicken, chicken nuggets, and imitation chicken. So how do you choose which is the healthiest? Well, it depends on what you want to avoid. If you want to avoid elevating your LDL cholesterol, then avoid added saturated fat and refined carbohydrates, which basically means deep-fried breaded chicken with the skin on. The breading will increase your triglycerides, which increase your LDL cholesterol. Now you want to eat the white meat as that has the least amount of fat. And of course, avoiding chicken wings and that chicken skin. Now, cooking methods can also make healthier foods toxic. So cooking with high heat like deep frying makes carbohydrates and proteins react to make a new molecule called acrylamide through a reaction called the Maillard reaction. It's easy to tell if your food has more acrylamide because it actually turns a shade of brown. The darker the food, the more acrylamide it will have. Problem is, acrylamide is a probable carcinogen. This is why you should never eat burnt food, but browning food is also a problem. It may taste good, but it's quite toxic. At home, you can reduce acrylamide by reducing the cooking time. So toasting your bread 5 minutes can more than triple your acrylamide production compared to toasting for 3 minutes. Light roasted coffee actually has more acrylamide compared to medium and dark roast. Contrary to popular belief, hot air fryers actually produce 30 to 40% more acrylamide than deep frying in oil. And this is because higher temperature increases makes more acrylamide than longer cooking time. Now you can avoid acrylamide by cooking your food in temperatures below 120 degrees Celsius, which means wet methods are the best cooking methods, like boiling or pressure cooking. Now, technically, if you buy a roasted rotisserie chicken, if you take off all that brown skin, the inside white meat will have less acrylamide. Grilled chicken has the same problem due to the high temperatures. So removing the outer brown or black parts are very important. And this is the same if you get deep fried chicken, because the outer layer, the brown part, has the acrylamide, and the inner part is the white meat with less acrylamide. The outer batter usually has eggs with flours or breadcrumbs that readily go through the Maillard reaction, reaching concentrations like 900 micrograms per kilogram of acrylamide on the outer surface. The inside, however, really stays at a constant temperature of the boiling point of water. So eating a skinless deep-fried chicken will give you more acrylamide than eating the center of a deep-fried and breaded de-skinned chicken. And it'll be easy to remove the breading on a whole piece of chicken, but very difficult to do so on chicken nuggets. But I would think people are probably eating the nuggets for the breading. And I wish I had known all this when my kids were little because I gave them a lot of chicken nuggets. I would have just bought them a deep fried chicken and peeled the outer layer. Now, the quality of your chicken nuggets makes a huge difference. There are brands with real pieces of chicken meat, and then there are processed chicken meat, and then there are plant-based imitation chicken nuggets. Now, I heard McDonald's is supposed to increase the quality of their chicken meat, but if you're going to shop in the supermarket, just know that all these brands have quite a bit of salt. This one in 3 ounces of chicken has 530 milligrams of salt, and that's without any sauce. This brand has just about the same amount of sodium, but has added phosphates. Now, phosphates are terrible. That's how the food industry makes your meat moist. It's also a way to sell you more weight for less chicken as water is heavier. Basically, products with phosphates make the meats retain more water. And when you buy meat, chicken, or beef, you pay per pound. So this means you're paying for water. Now, it wouldn't be so bad if it didn't cause osteoporosis and kidney failure. Phosphates can interfere with your body's ability to regulate how much calcium is in your blood, especially if you have had your parathyroid glands removed. Excessive phosphorus pulls out calcium from your bones, making them weak and susceptible to fractures. Now, when you eat high amounts of phosphates, it binds to calcium. This mineral complex, calcium phosphate, is essentially teeny tiny bone fragments that deposit in your blood vessels, making plaques that block your blood flow to vital organs like your eyes, your lungs, your heart, and brain. This is happening at a dangerous level in people who have kidney disease. So kidney failure patients, they need to reduce and really ideally avoid animal protein, especially processed meats that tell you that they put added phosphates. And when you buy raw meats, they may not tell you that they put phosphates in it. Phosphates are also found in canned sodas, and the fruity flavored sodas are the worst. They have the highest phosphate content of all canned sodas. Do you see how phosphates can add up? One serving may not be a big deal, but when everything you eat is pre-made foods, you may be eating 10 to 20 servings of phosphates on a daily basis. And when you eat that every day, that's going to have health consequences. It seems like all of these brands have a lot of sodium because no one's going to eat pre-made foods without salt. I do like that this brand doesn't use antibiotics, as that is good for you and good for me. It's good for the world since it only takes one person to pick up a drug-resistant bacteria to spread it around the world. Now, the serving size is usually like 3 nuggets. Do you really only eat 3 nuggets? That may be a toddler. This brand seems to have less sodium. Now, this brand added an emulsifier called guar gum, which are known to disrupt your gut microbiome. Now, if you're interested in plant-based alternatives, you're essentially eating reconstituted protein powder, which millions of people don't mind doing in their water bottle. These alternatives are still high in fat, but it has more monounsaturated fat. Now, this brand is one way to get a variety of ancient grains in your diet, and it has less salt and less fat. If you're interested in getting dietary fiber, these nuggets have 4 grams of fiber because they're made from jackfruit, and they also added some isolated fibers. It is also lower in sodium and saturated fat. But if I were to eat some nugget-shaped item, I would actually go for something made out of beans, like falafels, which are usually seasoned with parsley, a cruciferous vegetable. Beans can help to reduce blood sugars, control appetite, reduce weight, and lower cholesterol. And it's a great way to reduce your saturated fat. And if you want to know the difference between saturated and unsaturated fats on your health, watch the next video.